Hello and welcome to a new episode of Deprogrammed with Keri Smith. I am your host, Keri. If it's your first time here, this is a series where I talk to people about my old ideology, which I most often call social justice ideology, or you may know it colloquially as woke ideology. My guest tonight is a man that I had the pleasure of hanging out with when I was in New York recently. Got to go to the New York Pride Parade with him and Billboard Chris, Alex Stein, Dangerous Rhetoric was there, Mike Harlow, lots of people there. And this gentleman who I met for the first time. Please welcome Matt Antar. Hello, Matt. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for talking to me tonight and bearing with me. I messed up the intro. You guys don't know this, but we recut it because after all the buildup, I flubbed it. So it's sometimes good to do that right out the gate. Then you're like, nothing else will go wrong. Um, but thanks for hanging out with me tonight. Can
Sure.
you tell people a little bit more about yourself? And I should say, you described yourself to me as a former New York Democrat who woke up during the COVID years. So tell me what that was like.
So I was probably your typical I was an actor in New York. I was born and raised here. I wanted to pursue the arts. I was sort of born and raised as as a theater goer and wanted to do that. And I was pursuing that career for up until the start of all the COVID stuff, and I was pretty much hook, line, and sinker on the politics. I kind of describe myself as like sort of woke. Like
Mm.
I didn't buck the ideology necessarily. I also wasn't like in the streets with signs or anything, but I was just like,
Like
I just
me.
kind of accept. Yeah, right. Yeah,
You were
exactly.
you're like woke light.
Yeah, I just sort of accepted it. Like people would like say things, and it's funny when I look back on it. I I think to myself like people would say things to me, and I would be like, but I would be like, okay, I don't know enough about that to say anything. That sounds wrong, but I don't know. Okay, sure, and yeah. So I didn't rebuff anything. I was, I kind of got into politics a little bit with the 2016 election because like how could you not? And of course I was supporting Bernie Sanders. Um,
So did I.
yeah, right. Like, and
Mhm.
I feel like there's a lot of that when people like kind of wake up from the leftism thing. They are almost always former Bernie support. Like I don't see a lot of former like gung ho Hillary people that
No.
right.
I think it's like if there are degrees of brainwashed, maybe it gives you a good a good maybe the Bernie bros like us were just like 1 degree less brainwashed. Who knows?
Well, I think we were like, the establishment is ridiculous and like
Yeah.
Hillary is part of that machine. I think we already had enough like in our heads to be like, Hillary is part of a machine that like
Yeah.
I don't associate with, I don't want to be a part of. And so we saw Bernie as like, oh, he's anti-establishment. He's like, he's not bought by big corporations, even though
Mhm.
nowadays I don't know so much about that. But that's
Yeah.
another.
Plus,
Um,
we saw the unfairness of how the DNC colluded with the Clinton campaign
right,
against
right,
him.
yeah, totally. And it was like, so actually, fun fact, in 2016, I voted third party because I could not stand her.
Matt, okay, we do have a lot of overlap because I voted for Bernie in the 2016 primaries also, and then, when it came time to vote, I kept going back and forth. That programming that they do, that kind of propaganda they do about, you know, the other option, if Trump gets in there, it's gonna be Armageddon and he's a demagogue and all that. I really bought into that. It was like working on me. And so I would go back and forth between thinking I was gonna vote third party for Jill Stein just
Right.
to cast my protest vote for third party, Or like, no, I better just buckle up and vote for Clinton, you know? And in the end, I couldn't do it. In the end, I could not vote
Wow.
for her.
Wow.
So that's pretty similar, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And couldn't really explain it. It was just this revulsion. Like I did not trust the woman at all.
Right. I didn't trust. So I didn't trust Hillary. And another one that I don't remember what I did in this election, was so long ago, but another one that I always said I didn't trust was Bill de Blasio when he was running
Mm,
for mayor of New York. And there was a woman named Christine Quinn who was big in New York politics. I ended up sort of begrudgingly voting for her in the primary that year. But when de Blasio won the primary, which was a big surprise in New York, everybody thought she had it in the bag. I don't remember if in the general I voted for de Blasio or not, but like I always like people were like, oh, like, okay, Bill de Blasio. And I was like, I don't trust that man. And people were like, what? Why don't you trust him? I was like, something about his face. I literally said that. I was like, something about his face. Like, there's something wrong with him and I don't trust him. And people were like, you can't judge people. And I was like, nope. I was like, watch, one day I'm going to be proven right. And then COVID happened. And I was like, anybody who remembered me saying that, I was like, I told you.
Sometimes it's our gut is telling us like a monkey recognizing a snake, right? When
Right.
I think I heard Jordan Peterson talk about that once, how even a baby monkey who's never seen a snake before, the first time they see a snake, their gut, like they know what to do. They know to be
Right.
afraid. I think sometimes we have trace elements of that ourselves where like there's something really reptilian about that person. I can't explain what it is, but your gut's
Well, I
telling
mean,
you.
we are animals and we
Mhm.
do have instincts. I mean, like, I look, I mean, I very, I really am for my whole life like a trust my gut kind of person. Like,
Mm.
I think de Blasio was first elected in 2013 and I was just kept telling people I don't trust him. I don't trust him. People told me you're crazy. He'll be fine. And I'm like, I don't something about it, I can't explain it, but I've always sort of been like that. So,
Can I ask you a question? You said that I jokingly said you were woke light, but but a better explanation was you described it as sort of just going with the flow and, you're on the left and that's kind of where your tribe is going. I've thought about this a lot. Do you think most people are like that? They're not like gung ho, dyed in the wool, true believers in ideology. They're just more like, this is my tribe and this is like a school of fish. This is where we're going.
yeah, I honestly think that like the really like deeply indoctrinated people are a very, very small group of
Mm,
people, but they have such a loud voice that people are scared to stand up to them, right?
mm,
Like, and then so it permeates workplaces and it permeates like polite conversation. And it's like, and like, we're talking about instincts. It's like they put their ideology out there, I think, in a way that people sort of instinctively know I'm going to have trouble
mm.
if I challenge this, if I say anything against this. And I mean, not some, like, people have lives, people have jobs. They don't necessarily have a whole lot of time to be, researching like crazy, all this kind of stuff. So when somebody speaks really loudly with a lot of perceived authority on a subject that maybe you don't know, I think that's the other thing, is like, it's a
Mhm.
subject that maybe you don't know a whole lot about. You're just like, well, oh, okay. I mean, I haven't really looked into it. Even if you're like, that kind of sounds wrong, but I don't really know. Like, sure, you sound like you studied it, so like, fine,
Yeah.
like, trust the science. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
They do a lot of that appeal to authority fallacy, yeah.
Right.
Um, ah, Thank you for answering that. I think that's kind of what I think too. I think that the really extreme, true believer, like, ideologues and the ones with bad intent who use the ideology to gain power and money and fame and all that stuff. I think there aren't as many of them. I think the majority are maybe just going with the flow. They're in the tribe. They've got their head down. They don't have a lot of time to research, like you said, and it's just that tribalism element of humanity.
And like the actual cult, like the people who are really deep in it, like have permeated like a lot of corporate America, a
Yeah.
lot of workplaces. So it's like it's the added thing of like if I say anything like even on my social media or like even to a friend or whatever, like if it gets back to my job and
Mhm.
then or they're gonna blast me online and I'm never gonna work again. I mean, it's really it's a there's a lot of fear. I mean, I've spoken to people within these last 2 years, like I'm a loudmouth now. Maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves, but I'm like a super big loudmouth now. I don't care what people think, but a lot of people are, they're worried about their job. They were a lot of times very, most of the time very rightfully so. I mean, so a lot of people, they have kids,
Yes.
they have families, whatever. They need to put food on the table.
They have those fears are real. I
Yeah, they're
always say
very
that
real.
is they're real fears. I understand.
Yeah.
Um, I want to talk about that transformation, you being a super big loudmouth now. Can you tell me about what it was during tell me about your what people call your red pilling. How is it that you woke up? What's that story during the COVID years?
Okay, so I was in New York, right? And so the March 2020 kind of happened, and obviously, like I said, I was an actor, and the entire entertainment industry kind of shut down, like even a week before everything else, and then everything else shut down, and I was scared of COVID at first. I didn't know what was going on. I was like, I had heard of all these other countries shutting down, and um, so at first, what I did was I locked myself down like everybody else, and and I'd make little jokes online. Like it was 2020 was a census year, so I remember like I posted like, "Oh well, I can fill out the census at home, ha ha ha!" Like things to do at home, and so that was fine. But I also remember that like it was unpleasant, right?
Mm,
This wasn't fun. I wasn't able to see anybody.
yeah.
Um, and so I was glued to Andrew Cuomo's daily press conferences, not because I loved the man or anything. I mean, I back then I didn't really have much of an opinion on him, but I was glued to those press conferences because he was showing like the COVID curve, right? And every day I was watching it to see, okay, once the curve started to go down, I was like, okay, has it gone down far enough? Because in my head, I was like, they were saying back then, flatten the curve, flatten the curve. So
Mhm.
in my head, I was like, okay, I'm watching every day because when that curve is flat, they're going to open back up and I can have my life back.
Mm.
Right. And so I did that for, the end of March, most of April, the beginning of May. And so two things kind of happened simultaneously. Um, the first thing was that uh, the curve in at least in New York did flatten. It was like this huge spike and it came down and it was like on the floor, like to basically, I don't want to say pre-pandemic levels, but it was low, right?
Okay.
And the so then the news coming out of the governor's office was, okay, we're going to do a phased reopening, and it like had this like chart of like first we're going to open this, second we're going to open this, third we're going to open this, but there were so many venues and things that were just not on that list, like and there was no mention of the masks going away, and there was no mention. It was like, and then they were saying, so we have to figure out what the new normal is until we get a vaccine. And I was like, no. I
They
was like,
just moved the goalpost, right?
yeah. And I saw that so clearly. I was like, wait a minute. I mean, so first of all, I was never going to take that vaccine. That was something I knew from the beginning, and that has to
Mhm.
do with, I was kind of woke-ish, but I was always an anti-vaxxer. Can I say that? I hope you're not going to get
Oh,
into that,
you're one
but
of the actual ones.
yeah, no, I'm one
Now
of the
we're all
actual.
anti-vaxxers now.
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
been I've been called that so many times now, and I'm like, "Do you know how many vaccines I've taken in my life? Like, quite a few, even in adulthood.
right,
Just
right,
not this one."
right,
No,
yeah,
that's fine with me. I'm actually because of COVID, just so you know where I'm at, I used to have a lot of I thought I had opinions about anti-vaxxers. I have now realized because of COVID, I don't actually know anything about why they're against vaccines. So that's something I have to look into, and I want to look into soon. But okay, so go ahead. So you
Uh,
were
yeah. So I knew I was never going to take that vaccine, but um, regardless of that, I was like, no, what is this new normal until we get a vaccine? Because now I don't trust you that we're going to get normal even after the vaccine, because
Yep.
you said it's a state of emergency, which I had always understood to be something that is temporary and necessary for a short period of time, like a hurricane, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
state of emergency for a hurricane, and then 2 days and it passes, and then they lift it, and then that's it, and then whatever, they clean up the damage, but you don't have those extraordinary powers for too long. And I was like, no, I did not sign up for this. I didn't sign
Mhm.
up for the governor to tell me where I can go, what I have to put on my face when I leave my house.
Yeah.
And what killed me was I was doing it because I was scared of COVID when it was spiking, in that first spike. I was doing it thinking, I'll do this so that we'll flatten the curve, and then when it's flat, we can stop. And then they didn't let us stop. So I was
Mm.
like, I'm done with you. I'm completely
Wow.
done with you. Like, I'm not interested in your perpetual state of emergency that shows no sign of ending. Because like COVID, like really was for the summer of 2020, there was like nothing in New York. Um, and I was like, I'm not interested in this.
Yeah.
So that was like the first. So then, of course, because I'm an anti-vaxxer from before, I have a lot of resources, and I went
Okay.
straight to them. And I was like, okay, what are they saying? Because there wasn't a COVID vaccine out at the time. So I was like, what are they saying about masks? What are they saying about lockdowns? I trust these people. And suffice it to say, they were questioning the science on masks, and they were questioning the science on lockdown, and I started
The origin of the virus, which we were not
the
allowed to
origin of the
question,
virus.
remember?
Yep, the origin of the virus for sure. And I was like, well, I feel like, oh, and the severity of the virus for
Mm.
people who are not old and sick.
Mhm.
Like they were saying, they were screaming from the rooftops what we now know to be true. It's like anybody under 65 who doesn't have like a serious illness is like so statistically unlikely to die or even go to the hospital.
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, then why didn't they let the young people work and the old people maybe so the young people could get it, and then there would be immunity, and I was like,
Herd
why?
immunity.
Right, right. So anyway, that was my COVID thing. And then I had no social media presence at the time. I had a Facebook account and an Instagram account, but they were very personal. They were with just my friends, right? And my friends, my old woke friends, right? They were the only
Oh,
people
yeah,
I was
yeah.
connected with.
Yep.
Um, and I remember the very first post I put out that was ever so slightly critical.
So do I. Okay, what was yours?
Okay, so it was on Facebook, and this was like the softest. Like, you see what I write now, like that was so soft. But this was I said, there was a protest in front of Mount Sinai Hospital in April of 2020 in New York, and it was liberals. They were protesting because I think Mount Sinai is a Catholic organization, and there was some anti-gay something, and they were protesting that, right? And the cops came and said, this is an illegal gathering because it's how too many people in one place because of the pandemic. And they issued a citation to the group leader. This was just a local story in New York. It didn't blow up or anything, but I saw that and I posted it, and I said, wait a minute. I said, pandemic or not, we have a First Amendment in this country, and protesting's like a really big part of that. Like, you don't suspend the First Amendment because there's an emergency. That's you just don't do that. That's never been done.
Yeah.
And I posted that, and I had never prior to that experienced the pile on in the comments.
Yeah.
And you know what? There was a part of me that I knew it was coming. I knew it was
Yeah.
coming, and I
But you were
said,
prepared.
Yeah. I said, I don't care. I said, I don't care. I might lose friends over this. I truthfully, I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't
Yeah.
know what's going to happen, but it's probably not going to be positive in the sense it was positive for me, but it's probably not going to be positive in terms of the reaction I'm going to get from people who know me. And I kind of hoped and prayed that like my closest friends would understand that it was coming from a place of honesty. And that sort of panned out sort of half and half with my closest friends. But,
Yeah.
but yeah, I posted it, and, the First Amendment doesn't give you the right to spread your deadly diseases and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, it was just
Wow.
one after the other after the other. They were just coming at me. This was like late April of 2020. So, like, emotions were high. I understand that. But yeah. And then after that, I thought, well, I survived that.
Hmm.
After the commenting died down and whatever. And then I was sort of, getting to my place where I was like, I think this is all BS. And I think we were seriously tricked into compliance. And that was it. I just started posting, and it was all on Facebook with only liberals who I was
Yep.
connected with.
Yep. I've been there.
Yep. And it was, it was the thing with like 2 likes, and they would be my parents. And then and then all the comments, the vitriol. I mean, I was a racist, I was a Nazi, I was a fascist, I was all the things. I was anti-gay at some point, I think, which is like ridiculous if your viewers don't know I'm gay. So like,
it
but
it it makes it such a weird thing to talk about. This happens to so many people, and it makes me want to cry, but it also makes me laugh. I mean, so many different emotions, because I just thinking about people who haven't been through it yet, who are questioning and hearing this and knowing, just thinking of someone going through that at the beginning, thinking of myself when I went through it, thinking of you. It's like everyone is in one echo chamber, and having that fear of what's going to happen if you are honest with yourself and honest with them about what your real opinions are, and doing it anyway.
mm,
And you just walk through that fire of the fallout, and you said 50-50. It was about 50-50 with your friends.
yeah.
That's good. That's high compared to some people I've talked to. That's good. People
Yeah,
don't.
I mean,
Yeah.
my closest friends, who I would say, was probably about 6 people. My absolute closest friends, I think I have 2 of those left. So that was more than 50-50. But there
Mhm.
were some like less close friends that were like, they would say stuff like, dude, I don't know what you're doing, but like, I know you're a good guy. And I would be like, yeah, like whatever, I'm doing what I'm doing. You
Yeah.
don't have to do that. And, and we were kind of okay. So that's kind of why I said 50-50. But yeah,
Do you
go ahead.
do you think it's made you a stronger person?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Because I'm not like, now that I've done it, I'm like, okay, lose friends, gain friends. Like it's just, first of all, like I've sort of come to the realization like that's the ebb and flow of life a lot of times anyway. But I have never felt so good about myself until I really stopped caring what people thought and
Yes.
said what was on my
And
mind.
said the
And
truth.
yep,
Yes.
yeah. And losing friends hurt me. Like don't get me wrong. Like I'm still hurt to a degree that I had some close friends that I'd known for decades that won't speak to me anymore. They just flat out won't speak. Some of them just disappeared and I haven't heard from them, and some of them actively yelled at me and or tried to be like, I don't know what's going on, but I think, I've always known you to be a kind, compassionate person, so I don't know why you're doing this. And I'm like, I feel like I still am, but
Still am.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
I,
Matt. I
ah,
had yeah. I had a friend try and do an intervention with me. I had another friend say I had become a red-pilled alt-right troll. I had another friend publicly say I had joined a cult, which, by the way, honey, I left your cult. Like,
Yeah.
you're still in it.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. I have the freedom to say what I want now because I went through that fear and I went through that process, and you're still in that prison of having to agree with every single opinion in your echo chamber.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
oh, you're bringing up a lot of old stuff for me. This is good.
I'm bringing it up for myself too. I'm
I
like thinking
know.
about my old life, you know. I'm like,
This
but
is gonna be great because I still, you know what I was thinking the other day, Matt? I've been doing this series now for a few years and talked to all kinds of people and professors and comedians and people who are fighting back in the culture wars. Like, I started thinking I need to get back to the basics again and continue doing that. But I want to have more of these interviews about this is what it's like and this is what you can expect when you go through the waking up process, because I think I sometimes forget the longer you and I, people like us, are out of it, that there's still people waking up every day
I have
and
to
go.
tell you, so I have I do know one person right now, like within the past 2 weeks, who I was talking to, who was telling me that they're just kind of like questioning things, whatever, and they're like, "You're so outspoken. I don't know if I want to speak out." And I said, "Look, you know," and I was very honest with him. I was like, "Listen, like, don't expect to keep all of your current friends. Like, and if
Mhm.
you do, that's amazing. And like, God bless you. But, you know, but you shouldn't have that expectation with the way the world, you know, I was just trying to be like, so just know what I was trying to say, look, obviously support anybody speaking out, but you have to know what you're doing. And you have to, like, you know, make sure it's not going to render you out of a job or like whatever.
Mhm.
Like, just take it seriously, but also, like, you know, if you can sort of like breathe in, breathe out, and like kind of just be like, you know what, it's going to be okay,
Mhm.
and you kind of feel grounded about it, then of course I encourage you to speak out. Like, more
Yes.
people need to speak out. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like,
Exactly. Like, know what the consequences are and get to that place of being okay with it, or
mhm.
getting yourself to a place where you're okay with it. Did you start to, I had this in my case, once I started waking up, and it was something different. You woke up during the COVID years. I woke up in 2016. Different sort of triggers maybe that cause us to question things. But did you have the same experience as me where once the scales fell away from my eyes on one thing, then I started looking at other things like, do I know the truth about this or this or this? Did that happen to you?
Absolutely. So who were the ones questioning the COVID orthodoxy? The evil fascist Republicans.
Right.
You know, and I was like, and I was like, oh my God, they're the only ones that are saying what's true with COVID. And I had moments where I'm like, okay, I said this actually on the Dangerous Rhetoric podcast. Go ahead, what?
Well, I was gonna say, or it was people like Brett Weinstein, liberals like Brett
Yes,
Weinstein,
yes.
or liberals like me and other liberals maybe in your life who get called right wingers. That's the funny thing is it's like when you're just coming out of it and you're like, "Oh, it's only Republicans doing this." That's because 'cause they're so effective at calling any of us who disagree with any of the cult. It's like, "Oh, you're all crazy Republicans." But okay, go ahead. I just had to put that
No,
caveat in. We all get
abs-
called that, so
yeah. No, and you're absolutely right, but
yeah.
I didn't know that at the time.
Right,
You
right,
know,
right.
at the time, the only people the because you know, you got to kind of like get into the internet to find people like Brett Weinstein and that, or is it Weinstein? I think it's Weinstein.
Weinstein.
And like Dave Rubin, or like,
Dave Rubin,
you
yeah.
know, those kind of people. But
Jimmy
like,
Dore,
right. But like, I know who Tucker Carlson was. And I knew
right.
he was, you know what I mean? And like, he was an evil fascist Republican, you know, that is, So,
Right.
I mean, I was gonna say I said this when I was on the right. I said this when I was on the Dangerous Rhetoric podcast, but I was like, it was like a moment where I was like, okay, I'm gonna press play on Tucker Carlson. Like, okay, here we go. And I forced myself to be like, I'm going to watch him speak on a topic that is not COVID. I'm going to force myself, like, and I have all these preconceived notions about things, but like, I have to, not just him, but like anybody who is speaking up, like,
Yes.
I have to give you the time of day now. I do, because you proved yourself to be right about one thing. So I can't discount that, and I can't, you know, and and actually, Keri, I have to tell. I told you this in private already, but you were the first sort of internet person that I found 2 years ago when you spoke on trigonometry. Um,
No, I forgot that you told me that. That's
yeah,
great.
yeah.
I'm
So
so glad you found that interview.
yeah,
Um, wow, that's
and
always
I was
great to hear.
I was going through like the same thing you were describing going through beforehand. So I was like, okay, who is this? Keri Smith.
Yes.
I was like, yeah.
That's why telling these stories is so important. That's why you telling your story is so important. And because there's always other people waking up and they're going through the same things. I was just having this moment as you're telling me, Matt, about the first time you hit play on a Tucker Carlson video. I'm laughing like at an AA meeting. I feel like we're in a cult support group, like we all came out of the same cult, and then you laugh with that recognition, and you're like, I did that. First time I pressed play, it was on a Ben Shapiro video. It's like, oh, I'm doing something naughty. Like, like
Yep.
let's see what I
Yeah.
think. You brace yourself because you have all these prejudices and preconceived notions, and you realize it's like, I've actually never listened to this guy. I should probably
Yes.
just listen.
Yes. Yeah. I realized afterwards, I'm like, have I ever watched an episode of this? Or have I watched like a tiny clipped out like moment on a liberal show that they made look bad? Like which did I actually watch? You
Yes,
know?
yes.
Yeah.
Ah, I feel you. Okay,
Yeah.
that's really funny. So you watched a Tucker Carlson clip, and what did
Right.
you think? Do you remember what you thought about it?
No, I mean, I don't even remember if Tucker was the first one. He's just the most recognizable
Yeah,
name. It
yeah.
was like Fox, right? Like I was just like, okay, where do I find things? Like, I was definitely Ben Shapiro, like on a couple things, like like the big names. I was like, I guess I'll watch this. I guess I'll watch that. And then slowly, what happened was the YouTube algorithm actually worked for good, and I slowly started to get things
Mhm.
that pop up that were like, oh, what's this? Leaving the left. Oh, I want to watch that. Like, oh, I found like people like Brett Weinstein, like,
Mhm.
just because YouTube suggested him to me. And I was like, that. So in one instance, it worked for the good. And I was able to kind of like, once I started watching things, more was popping up, and I was
Mhm.
like, and I only was speaking about COVID because it was the only thing at the time, because it was the only thing I felt like I was educated on, but I was listening a lot to the other stuff. So the next big topic that I really like delved into was the gender and CRT
Mhm.
stuff. That happened a little later, the CRT stuff, but it was really like the gender stuff. And I didn't say, I mean, this was like summer 2020. I was starting to watch things about that. And I don't think I opened my mouth about it for a year. Not because I was like in
Good, 'cause you're
disagreement, but yeah, I had to, first of all, I had to figure out if I agreed with it first, right? I was
right.
like, I don't know. So, some of this sounds reasonable. Some of this maybe I disagree with. I have to like, and then I kind of decided what I thought, after a few months, but I was like, okay, that's what I think, but I can't articulate it yet. So I'm still going to keep my mouth shut until I feel like I'm very like solid about what I think
Mhm.
about it. But I had that leisure at that point. You know what I mean? Like I was like, I want to watch this stuff and I'm not on a timeline. I'm like, I'm speaking my mind about COVID, and one day I'll feel like I have enough knowledge about these other subjects that I'll open my mouth about that. But I knew I would, and I wasn't scared of it at that point. I
Yeah.
was like, I'll talk about whatever when I feel like I know enough about it.
When
Like,
you actually have an opinion that's yours, that you
mm-hmm,
formed.
mm-hmm,
I feel
yeah,
that. I get that. Ah, I love this. Okay. So you started watching gender critical stuff. So tell us about your evolution of thought on that, because you work with a group now that's getting a lot of flack, a lot of heat online, called Gays Against Groomers.
yeah, yeah. So that's sort of the like that's sort of the present day story that had a couple years leading up to it.
Mm.
And yeah, so at the time, like I knew trans people, and I was like, well, they're nice, So I was like, so what's all the fuss about? They seem happy, they seem, fine, and obviously, the opinion that I've landed on, obviously, is that if you're an adult and you want to do something that you think is going to make you happy, then enjoy, right? So I don't
Mm.
think that I've morphed too much on that, but there was a lot of stuff I needed to hear about what they're doing in the schools and
Mhm.
how it's being promoted to kids in a way that like makes it fun and exciting and like so attract, and it's like, and I was like learning, and I would watch things and I would be like, oh, like, because I'm still sitting there being like, well, why would I, like LGBT solidarity, like why would I say anything bad about trans, and I had to like come to a point where I was like, look, I'm not saying anything bad about trans people, I'm saying bad stuff about people who manipulate other people into making rash decisions is really what I have a problem
Yeah.
with. And so I would see things, and then you just see more and more like, okay, they're gonna put this like pornographic sex book in a fourth grade class, and I'm like, like, especially because
Yeah.
like nobody did that when I was in school,
Yeah.
and I was like, like they would have
Yeah.
been fired immediately, right? So I'm like, what is that? And I'm like sitting there, and
Yeah.
I remember like just watching stuff and being like, no, that's not real. And like Googling it and being like, this can't be real. I'm verifying this for myself. Like,
Mhm.
and, just doing, medical procedures on like, when they talk about, okay, they're giving like mastectomies to like 12, 13-year olds. And I'm like, man,
But the
the
soft
thing,
language, Matt, the gender affirming
the
care.
gender affirming care. I just thought to myself, man, if I was allowed to just do whatever I want when I was 12 years old, I would have been in a lot of trouble. Like,
Yeah.
of course I wanted to do stupid stuff, like, and I want to, clarify. It's like, I don't think like real people with gender dysphoria who transition as adults are doing anything stupid necessarily. But as a kid, of course, there
Mhm.
was all kinds of stuff that I wanted to do that, like, I'm like, you're 12, you have peer pressure, which that's the other thing is that I feel like there's a lot of peer pressure right
Mm.
now to do that, right? And I know what peer pressure can do. Like, I got in trouble at school for things I was peer pressured into doing. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? I'm like, if I don't, if I, this is a funny story. If I don't like, during a winter storm, if I don't throw snowballs at cars with my friends during the winter storm, then they're going to make fun of me all day. And then like the principal came out, what are you doing? You know what I mean? And
They're doing it.
yeah, right. And it's, I mean, that's sort of a light example, but anyway,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you started noticing all this stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about Gays Against Groomers, and why um, do you think it's important for gay people or trans people who care about these issues? Is it more important? Is it the same degree of it? Is there a special, is it different for, I think there's a different quality. This is why I'm asking, if you're gay or transgendered, that sometimes you're used as a shield for
Right.
this ideology. The same way they use women as a shield for some things, or they use black people as a shield for other things. Can you talk a little bit about Gays Against Groomers and why you're a part of it?
Yeah, so gays against groomers. So to answer your first question, um, I think I think if you look at it objectively, with no bias and no societal like whatever put on it, then no. I mean, there's no difference if a gay person or a straight person speaks out about it. People should be able to speak their mind, right? But
Right.
when you consider it from a societal lens, right? And okay, let's say there's like a person who's like on the fence, right? And they're like, I don't know, like I kind of don't like the gender stuff, but like I also feel like people should be able to do what they want, whatever. And a straight person says to them, you know this is why it's potentially harmful, and this is why, and they could say all the right reasons and everything. And uh that person may sit there and go, yeah, but like the LGBT community, I hate that so much, but for lack of a better word, the LGBT community is really pushing for this, and like they may have in their head, well, they're so oppressed, and they might know something that the straight person doesn't know. Whereas like if gay and trans people are like, no, like we don't want this. Like obviously I don't think we speak for the community, because I don't think there is this amorphous community.
Yes.
But they if they hear it from somebody from this perceived community, and at least know, and especially, okay, so gays against groomers, it's turning out to be a lot of us, right? So it's like, okay, it's not just this one crazy gay guy, or like, it's like,
There's a
oh,
lot.
there is a bunch of people who are brave enough to use their voices publicly on forums like social media and say, I don't agree with this. Don't do this in my name. That one is like very. I just made a video the other day. I was like, basically, like it was something like really gross. It was like a stripper holding up a 4-year-old on a pole. It was just vile. And I made the video, and I basically was like, don't do this in our name, because it was happening at a pride parade, right? And I was like, don't do this in our name. I don't want LGBT attached to this. This is not LGBT. This is a stripper with a kid. Like, what? Yeah. Everybody knew 5 years ago that kids don't go to strip clubs. And I mean, it wasn't a club, it was out on the street, but you know what I mean? Like, yeah. You don't bring kids to see strippers, because that's for adults. And to have gay people and trans people and drag queens and all representation from all the groups that as you said, that people use as a shield okay, so I'm a gay man, so I'm the shield for like my identity, for lack of a better word. I hate that I'm using all these
Me
words,
too.
but
I know
for
what you
lack
mean.
of a better word, my quote unquote identity is somebody might use that to say something, and then I come up with that said identity and say, not me. Yeah. And there's another gay guy over there who's like, not me either. And then something with trans, and then a trans person comes up and says, I'm not about that. You know what I mean? It just, again, for that fence sitter, because you're not going to get a social justice. You're not going to get Keri Smith in her former life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not going to get like the absolute, like,
because they've been trained to believe, a lot of social justice people, even though they can see the evidence to the contrary right in front of their faces, but they've been trained and brainwashed and programmed to believe that this ideology speaks for groups of people. And one of those groups of people is LGBT.
Right.
And they're speaking on behalf of and in support, and everything the ideology pushes is in support of
Right.
these poor marginalized groups, one of them being LGBT, and to say you don't speak for me,
Yeah.
that's
Right.
really big.
Right. You know, I saw similarly when the BLM riots were happening in New York and all over the country. But like, I was seeing like the ones in New York all summer and part of the fall. Uh, that I was seeing videos of white protesters going up to black cops that were trying to keep order in
Mhm.
a tumultuous situation and calling them the worst names that I won't even repeat on your show
Yep.
because they were the most despicable, racist
Yep.
names. And they purported to be protesting against racism. And
Yeah.
they're saying that to a black cop's face.
Crazy.
And
That's
I
how
was like,
crazy you get. That's how crazy you get.
I remember even back then, like when I was just kind of starting to look at things like that. And I was like, well, I thought this was about racism, but you're being racist. And then I went, it's not about racism, it's about cops. So if the black guy puts on the blue uniform, then he's not the right kind of black guy.
Right.
And I went, and I remember being like, yeah, but I'm not, if you claim to like be an ally to black people in whatever struggle they're going through, then you're not going to go up to a black person and call them a vile name. You're just not.
Yeah.
So
It's all about looking at people's behavior, not their words.
yeah.
And what does that remind you of? That we saw New York Pride, New York City Pride a couple months ago. Guy starts screaming at Mike Harlow. We got part of this on tape.
Hmm.
Guy starts screaming at Mike Harlow, who's gay, and they start arguing. And the guy admits, the guy who's screaming and calling Mike Harlow homophobic, that guy was straight.
I know.
Much like the white person yelling at the black guy, the black conservative, or the black cop.
Yeah. And and I guess it like throw him for a loop for a second when Mike was like I'm gay.
Yeah.
And the guy was like, okay, okay. And then he had to like recover for a
Mhm.
second. Then he was like, I forget what he said, but something like, well, if you're gay, you should definitely not be whatever, or whatever he said.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and I was just like, man, dude, like, look, I don't personally have a problem with a straight guy saying something about gay people to a gay guy. Like I left that cult for a reason. But
Mhm.
if I'm going to use this guy's logic, then he should have immediately stopped talking when Mike
Exactly.
Harlow said he was gay, because
Exactly.
now you're like straight splaining to a gay guy,
Yes.
right? Like,
They don't follow their own stupid rules because the rules are stupid. They don't
yeah.
follow them. Nobody follows them. They show up at rallies with signs that say silence is violence. I was at this protest where several people had the signs that say silence is violence, and I went up to this one woman and I said, that sign is a lie. That's not true. And she starts yelling with me, and I'm trying to talk with her calmly. And one of the points I was trying to make to her was, you don't believe silence is violence. Because
Right.
if you did, you wouldn't be telling me to shut up.
Right.
Because me shutting up would be silence, which would be violence. Like,
Which would be
like
violence.
you don't even believe your own stupid signs.
Well, so silence is violence, but then also words are violence.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so am I supposed, you know, silence is violence, but also shut up and let like insert marginalized group here speak.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so it's like, so am I supposed to shut up and let them speak? Or if I do that, is my silence violence? Like, I'm confused about what I'm supposed to do. Like, I'm trying to follow your rules here. You're making it very difficult, you know?
It's like very confusing. And shut up and let them speak unless they're the wrong kind of black person, in which case talk over them white person.
Oh
Like,
yeah. Oh yes. Yes. No. Um. Any kind, black people, gay people, trans people,
yeah.
whatever the person of the moment who's so victimized and marginalized. Um. If a person from that group gets up and says the wrong thing, ooh, back up. And you're right. It's like white people and straight people, which again, like me, I left that ideology.
Mhm.
So like white people and straight people are more than welcome to talk in my book. But like again, if I'm trying to like follow your rules, like, well, why are you screaming at that black guy because he has a different opinion than what you think he's supposed to have? Why are you trying to, it's like, you can turn it around on them, right? It's like, oh, are you trying to control the black man's thoughts? Like,
Yeah.
that doesn't sound very progressive. Like, are you trying to control, like, how this trans person thinks? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought trans liberation.
Yeah.
Liberation means like, they're
The
allowed to do what they want.
yeah, the ugly truth is, Matt, the answer to that question is yes,
Yeah.
because everyone has to think like they do. Everyone
Right.
has to speak what they do.
Right.
It's crazy. It's like one voice, one opinion. It's the Borg, you know. Um, I can I ask you, you
Yeah.
said earlier about how you just become a super big loudmouth now. So, what is that like? Because you told us about the process of like that first, you still remember the first post where you said something even slightly maybe questioning something.
Right.
What's that process like to get to where you're at now, where you don't deal with that fear as much? Or do you still deal with fear in different situations of saying what you think?
So, okay. So, and I remember the exact month, until August of 2021, my social media posting was confined to Facebook. Um, because there was a part of me that I was like, so my strategy here was that I want my like connections, right? Because Facebook is private. So I want my connections, my personal friends, acquaintances, whatever, to hear what I have to say, because they know me and
Mm.
they know that like they have history with me. They probably, most of them never thought I was a bad person before. They probably, most of them do now, but that's another story.
Yeah.
But I thought like some of them will hear me, and some of
Yes.
them did.
Yes.
Some of them did. The most surprising thing to me, it really caught me by surprise, was how many, none of them were my old closer friends, but how many acquaintances I had would send me private messages. I completely agree with you. You're so brave for speaking out. Like, and I just wish I could do it, but I can't because of X, Y reason, And
Yes.
I didn't push them. I didn't like, I was like,
Mhm.
all right, do what you need to do. But I was, and the most surprising people that I never would have thought.
Mhm.
And now I'm getting all these messages like, oh my God, keep doing what you're doing. I completely agree. This COVID stuff is bullshit. These things are bullshit. We need more people like you. And I'm like trying to like gently nudge them to be like, you can be that person.
Yeah. I
But
know this is all very familiar. They're like
yeah,
on the DL, right?
right. Yeah, they're total like closet wrong thinkers.
Mhm.
Um, so and actually a couple of them down the road did start putting posts out on social media. And I
Yes.
thought, good for you. God bless you. Like I know how that feels to do it, to do the
Mhm.
first one. So, but anyway, so it was confined to Facebook until August of 2021. And then the guy that I never trusted, Bill de Blasio, he came out with his New York City vaccine mandates in that month. He announced them. They didn't go into effect until September, but he announced them. No restaurants, no theaters, no museums, no nothing. The only places I could go were the store, where I didn't sit down or spend any length of time, my job, and my house. Those were the
Wow.
only place, or and anywhere outdoors. Thank you, in the middle of winter. Well, at first it wasn't winter, but they went on till Anyway,
Wow.
um, and it was like I was already kind of shooting my mouth off, but in a private venue, and that just kind of snapped the next thing in me, and I started posting on Instagram, and I said, I'm not going to make it private. I'm not going to
Mm.
make it private. I'm just going to do it. It's going to go out there. My employer could see it. You know, people who, are looking me up for different reasons could stumble upon it. And I went, no, they are segregating residents
Yes.
in New York City. I said, I
Yes.
don't care anymore. I don't care anymore. And so I started posting to Instagram. And then, which I had like, again, like I had like my friends, whatever on Instagram, but that was the next step because it was public.
Yes.
And then I started posting to Twitter where I had like 80 followers and hadn't posted since like 2016. And it was like Yankees tickets or something.
It
It
was
was like
like,
some stupid,
go
like,
Bernie.
right. No, no, it wasn't even that. I had like 8 posts, and like one was like, I'm excited to go to a Springsteen concert. One was like, I'm so excited, like I'm going to the Yankees, like with a hashtag that could get my seats upgraded or something. Like that was all I used Twitter for.
And
Like,
then 5 years later, your next tweet is like, "This authoritarian tyranny is"
yes, exactly, exactly. And you know what? And, I didn't. So I didn't have much of a following, but I had just gotten friendly with Mike Harlow and the Dangerous Rhetoric boys, and they were more connected on Twitter. So like I was like kind of posting, and they were like, sharing my stuff, and then like I started getting like these random followers that I didn't know, and I was like, oh, is this how Twitter works? And so now. And now I barely post to Facebook anymore because I'm like, my friends all have heard what I've had to say. Now I'm posting on Instagram and Twitter because they're public.
Yeah.
So that's sort of where I've gone now. Is I'm like, no, I'm going to post things in a public forum, and people are going to know what I have to say, and maybe they care, maybe they don't. But I'm going to use any platform that I've built up for myself to say what I think.
To say what you
And
think.
yeah,
God bless you. And
thanks.
I know I had that moment where I probably use Facebook and Twitter. Well, I use Twitter a little more, but I use Facebook quite a bit still because I had that moment where I just made it public.
Oh
I
wow,
had
maybe
I
I
had
should
been
do
I had been locked down too. Like I had been on private, and when I had my great unfriending, my awakening, my whole echo chamber was social justice. It was like the great pile on. And then over time, and then I was like, it was constant pile on all the time. So I just opened my profile up publicly. And just like on Twitter, you start meeting people. People start finding your posts who agree with you and some who, and so now it's moved so far. There's still some woke people who are friends with me. I see them. There's still
that. Yeah,
quite a few who haven't unfriended me. They're just not the ones who comment anymore.
right.
So, but I made it open, and it's interesting because when you put yourself out there that way, if you ever do make it public on Facebook, I'd be curious to talk to you again and see what if you notice the difference in audiences that you're talking
Interesting.
to, because Twitter seems to be more male to me, and people who are more plugged in already with what's going on in
Right.
every day, like the 24-hour news cycle. Facebook seems to be more like moms and who are very concerned and very plugged in, but maybe not necessarily with the 24-hour news cycle. And so I tend to write a bit longer form there. And anyway, this is your interview. I'm rambling about this, but you should try at some point
I
maybe
will.
opening up your Facebook just to see who you
Yeah, I
find.
will. I mean, so
Mm.
the only concern I would have with that is that my Facebook is a little bit more personal, and like
Right.
there's like family on there and everything. So not that my family doesn't know what I think, but like you know
Oh yeah, there's
this is
dangerous
my
people out
journey.
there. Yeah.
This is my journey. This is not my family's journey. So like I try to like I try to keep it even though like I actually, speaking of my family, like, so my dad's side of the family has always been very conservative, right? And we've always been close with them. There was never a time that like, politics had been, a wedge where we, didn't see each other or anything. We were always very close. But these last 2 years have really like, I've really connected with a lot of my relatives on my father's side
Aw.
because like we're like talking and they're like, oh my God, like we agree, like this is so great, and I'm like, yeah, and they want to know like, well, what was it for you? And I'm like, well, it was COVID, and then this thing and that thing, and so there's been some like really great happiness with the. Actually, I have to tell you, the whole thing, regardless of the nasty comments, regardless of any friends I may have lost, has been a very positive experience for me.
Yes.
But a really nice thing has been having now a different kind of connection with certain people in my family, and having like a different connection with certain friends who like surprise me. They still surprise me sometimes on Instagram, on not really Twitter, because Twitter is a lot of like people I've only either known in the last 2
Strangers,
years or
yeah.
strangers or whatever. But on Instagram and people who even to this day are like, wow, I just found out you're posting about all this stuff. Like, I totally agree. And I'm like, and if they're in New York, I'm like, well, we should get coffee then. Like, that's so cool, there's been like I said, the whole experience has been positive in a way, but those things are like extra special, right?
Yes, Matt, you are speaking my language. You are my people. What is Are you a Libra?
No, I'm a Gemini.
Oh, okay. That
That's
makes
why
sense too.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get some people mad at me like, Carrie believes in astrology. No, not necessarily. I just like to talk every once in a while. I only know a couple of signs. Gemini is one of the ones I know. So anyway, everything you're saying, I just yes.
Yeah.
We need to talk more often.
Yeah.
So what are you doing now? So you've got the Twitter, you've got Twitter where you're more public, and Instagram. And by the way, you guys can follow Matt on Twitter. It's in the description below the video. But it's MANTARNYC. Can you spell that better than me?
Yeah. It's basically, so my name is Matt Antar, right? So it's my first initial M, and then my last name Antar, Antar, and then NYC, which was a handle that was created when I was more proud of living here. But that you can follow me for my hot takes, and you can comment your agreement or your disagreement or whatever. I love all things. So yeah.
Here,
And I have a YouTube channel, but I haven't posted on it in like quite a while. The YouTube channel has about 5 videos on it. Oh yes, nice. There it is. There's where you can follow me. I'm going to start like making more YouTube videos, and I may try. I was talking to Keri a little bit off camera, but I think I'm going to try and get some interviews and stuff like that. And so I'm gonna. But if you want to subscribe to my YouTube channel, I promise I'll put more content there eventually.
And you can find the link below.
Yeah.
Go subscribe so he feels pressure to make
more
videos.
Right. And watch the ones I put out. I mean, they're I can't believe I'm saying this, but they're a little dated at this point because they mostly all have to do with the mandates in New York. So the mandates really, really kicked something off in me, because that's when I started posting everywhere, and I was making YouTube videos, and I was just like, I have to talk like segregation. Like at the time, it was 2021 at the time. And I'm like, segregation in 2021, like I can't go to there is still to this day on the books in New York City, there is a vaccine mandate in the private sector that says any employee who works on site at any job in the 5 boroughs is required to have 2 shots. Now, Eric Adams, the current mayor, has basically admitted he's not enforcing it anymore. Anymore being the key phrase. So there was enforcement of it at one time, but he won't take it off the books. And I mean, and again, it's not a law, right? It's an executive order that Bill de Blasio put on the books 4 days before he left office. It was like his final like FU to the people who didn't get the shot. And Eric Adams, the current mayor, who's no better, I'm sorry. He kept it on the books. Like I said, he's basically admitted that they're not doing any enforcement on it, but he won't take it off the books.
They won't take it off the books.
So, I have a job and I work on site. And so I've been defying it for the last 8 months. So come for me, Eric Adams. I don't care.
I love you. I love your energy.
Thank you. So yeah, there are people who are defying your. If Eric Adams happens to watch this, there are people who are defying your vaccine mandate, and I have been since the first day it was implemented. And
Can I
basically,
just say you've got a very might be very New York, old school New York energy, but also very Texas energy. And you're welcome here anytime if you ever need to flee.
oh, I gotta like come down. I've never been to Texas. I wanna go see it. I wanna
What?
like, yeah. I've never been.
Oh, Matt, if you ever come, we'll have the most. I'll give you the whole experience. We'll go to
Oh,
barbecue, we go two-step in, do some thrifting.
I
Like,
love that.
really.
I
Come when
love that.
there's blue bonnets and you see all the wildflowers in May. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So I obviously have been. It's moving has been on my mind. Like, how could it not be? Right? I mean, I love what this city was. I adore my memory of what the city used to be, and it really breaks my heart to even think about leaving. But I mean, we have politicians that could put a mandate in, at any moment, and
Yeah.
I can't live like that. My parents are moving for that reason. They're moving down south. And so I have sort of been like, I kind of feel like I've been to Florida before,
Mhm.
but that's a state that's on my mind. I've never been to Texas. I've never, those are like the two states, but there's like a whole bunch down south that I could consider. So I think I got to start doing like a little visiting tour of a bunch of places and see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have come and take it energy, which is a Texas energy. Come and take it.
That's
And
great energy. Yeah, I love
and
that.
so I'm gonna put Texas hat in the ring if you do move. I kind of think this is happening now where I know a lot of people and even some friends who I thought would never leave New York City, even who is it's been very hard for them to leave, who have left because it
Mhm.
became so authoritarian and because they don't see it changing direction. And unfortunately, I mean, we're 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 far behind, but we're not that far behind in other places. Like Austin is like in terms of ideology, it's a little woke New York or LA,
Yeah.
and that's who's moving there and populating it. And so I'm always telling wrong thinkers, I can't do anything to stop the influx of people. What I can do is encourage you to consider us to come and help us with reinforcing just reality based people. You don't have to be Republican. I don't care if you're a Democrat or I just want you to be based in reality.
Yeah.
That's it. Come help us fortify Texas, Matt. This has all been an ad to get you to come.
To move to Texas. No, well, so I mentioned my parents are moving. They're moving to South Carolina because they're like,
That's where I'm from.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Cool.
So because so my parents have been on this same. They're not doing the social media stuff, obviously, but like well, actually, no, that's not true. I have to say that's not true. My parents have posted a lot on Facebook, a lot. So they're sort of I love my family's the best. But but they're going down to South Carolina, and they've had conversations with their neighbors. Because like I said, I was born and raised here, so they are in the city, my parents, and the neighbors are like, oh, congratulations, blah blah blah. Oh, the only thing is, the politics down there, and my parents are like, yeah, like that's why we're going. But like I'm not gonna start a fight with you right now. So like, sure, fine. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
they should keep up appearances. That's why I try to do a text, like write postcards back. It is awful here. Day 25 in South Carolina. Don't come. These Republicans, the
Oh my
worst.
god, they're so awful. It's terrible here. Don't ever come. Yeah. No, totally. No, I love that because it's like, well, and so they were down there looking at their new place, and they were out, and I may be getting this story wrong, but maybe somebody recognized their accent or something. Anyway, they were talking to somebody, and they're probably going to watch this and tell me I'm butchering this story, but they were talking to somebody, and they were like, "Oh, we're moving down from New York," and the person down in South Carolina is like, "You're not bringing your politics, are you?" And they were like, "No, no, that's why we're leaving." They're like,
Yes.
you know,
I do the same. I do the same when I meet people. I'm like, welcome to California. I hope you left California in California.
yeah,
Like, you
yeah,
know, like, I mean,
yeah.
sorry, opposite. Welcome to
Right.
Texas. I hope
Welcome
you
to
left
Texas.
California.
Yeah.
Like, it's just really, again, it's just, I don't know. We're living in a crazy, interesting time. How about that?
You
Like,
know what? We were all meant to live in this time. I really firmly believe that. I don't think that there are any accidents. And I know you're a Christian. I'm not, but I'm very spiritual. And I don't think it's an accident that we were. I think that we chose to be here in this time for certain lessons we had to learn.
mhm.
That's what I think. You can call me woo woo or anything, but that's what I think. And so I have tried to, even on bad days, I've tried to look at this like okay, like I'm supposed to learn something from this though. Like I'm supposed to get stronger. I'm supposed to become better. I'm not supposed to be the same person that I was 2 years ago.
Yeah, I believe that too. I believe every, okay, from my perspective, it's similar. I believe every thing that we go through that's a trial or um, a struggle or something hard or what, you know, we're not the first. Every human has gone through something, and there is some. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity. There are always opportunities, no matter how awful it is, to learn something, to grow. There's some. You just have to find what the opportunity is in that awful thing,
Right,
or
right,
the
right.
thing that you're viewing as awful at the moment. And sometimes, depending on what it is, you get past it and later look back and say, yeah, that was really bad at the time, but it's not so bad now. Like, I can't believe it was such a big deal, you
Well,
know?
I've had these moments in my life before, unrelated to this, but there's and I've heard people talk about this all the time, like for how awful it was, whatever the awful thing was, like then they wouldn't be doing X now, and they're so
Yes.
happy with it. You know what
Yes.
I mean? Like, and so it's like, yeah, sometimes the flowers do pop up after the storm. You know what I mean? Or I don't know
Yes.
the analogy, but you know,
You're exactly right, Matt. I
yeah.
agree. So I'm gonna let you go. Remind people where they can find you online and promise me that you'll come back and hang out on a live episode sometime.
Yes. Oh my God, I would love
Okay,
to.
cool.
I so you can find me at Mantar NYC. That's my first initial, my last name, NYC, on Twitter and Instagram. You can find me on my YouTube channel that will be linked. And again, I will get more content up there, I promise. And follow Gays Against Groomers on Twitter and Instagram. I post content with them as well. They're little like short, like 1 minute reels and things that I try to keep them like funny, but also sending a message. And not just me. There's a lot of great people who are posting to that, and so follow them as well. Um, and yeah, that's it. Yeah,
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for hanging out with us.
yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you, Keri.